Hello, hello, and welcome to week 4 of the massive open online course for the University of Nicosia's master's degree in digital currencies. This is Andreas and Antonopoulos. I'll be your teacher for today's session, and I have some great questions. Our topic today is mostly about wallets, although we will cover a couple of other related topics from the previous weeks. So if all is good, let me know in the chat that you hear me, that you see me, and that you're ready to learn. I see lots of people from all around the world have joined us in the chat. Fantastic to see you all. Let's get started right away. As soon as I see that we're good with sound and video, we're going to get started. I'm just waiting a few seconds because there is a slight delay in the live stream, so I don't immediately see your responses in the chat. All good, fantastic. Let's go. Let's get started. All right, our first question comes from Eve. Eve asks, what is the software responsible for generating a private key offline since the device is not connected to the network? And the follow-up question is, hardware wallets like Trezor can produce private public keys and addresses only for Bitcoin, or can they also do it for other coins as well? Now, first of all, there's already a reply in the forum, and this is one of those cases where it's great to have these conversations in the forum so that you can see and learn from each other. Tatiana has responded that Trezor, the Ledger Nano, and several other hardware wallets offer hundreds, sometimes thousands of different coins. However, I believe there are cold wallet hardware that only support Bitcoin. That is true. The most well-known example of that would be the Cold Card, which is an air-gapped cold storage hardware wallet that is only Bitcoin. Now, how do these hardware wallets offer support for all of these different coins? It's really quite simple. They do so based on a technology called hierarchical deterministic wallets, or HD wallets. And these wallets are wallets where instead of having just one key, you have a tree of keys. That entire tree is backed up by a seed. So to help you remember how this works, you plant a seed, you create a root, and the root sprouts a tree of keys. And the seed, which you're probably familiar with, is a mnemonic phrase made of 12 to 24 English words, usually, although you could do it in other languages too, and dictionaries do exist for other languages. Most wallets use the English dictionary. So when you initialize a new hardware wallet, or you initialize a new software wallet that uses hierarchical deterministic wallets, it allows you to make a backup of your seed, which is the 12 to 24 English words. You write that down. That is the basis for all of your private keys, public keys, and addresses for all of your accounts, sub-accounts, and different currencies. So the tree itself, if you think of it as having all of these branches, different branches can be used for different cryptocurrencies and blockchains. And within those branches, you might use smaller branches for different sub-accounts. Let's say, for example, you want to organize your money in a way that's more convenient. Maybe you have, say, a main account that you use for your own spending. Maybe you have another account that you use for your business. Maybe you have a third account that you use for savings. Well, maybe in that case, you can have 3 sub-accounts on the Bitcoin cryptocurrency, and then you can have 2 sub-accounts on the Ethereum cryptocurrency, etc., etc. So by having a tree of keys that has its root in a single seed, a mnemonic phrase of 12 to 24 words, you can back up that phrase, and then you can regrow this tree with all of the same keys for all of your different cryptocurrencies, and for each cryptocurrency, all of the different sub-accounts. And it's called a hierarchical because it's the shape of a tree, and it's called deterministic because all of the keys are generated in a sequence from the same seed, which allows you to recreate them anytime you want from that same seed on any compatible device. Now, let's go to Eve's first part of the question. What is the software responsible for generating a private key offline? Now, whether you're generating a single private key or you're generating this seed that you're going to have your wallet grow a tree of private keys from, the process is the same. Both the private key and the seed are simply numbers. All they are numbers. Very long numbers, but nevertheless numbers. So if we wrote these numbers in decimal, they'd be anywhere from 30 to 77, let's say, digits long. So think of 1 followed by 77 zeros. That's how big this kind of number is. So it's going to be somewhere in that range. So if you wanted to say, let's pick a private key, how does your wallet generate this private key? Well, it basically picks a number at random. And in order to do that, most hardware wallets use a specialized piece of hardware called a true random number generator. These use various physical processes, like the noise produced in circuits called thermal noise, which is affected by things like cosmic radiation, and therefore cannot be predictive. It produces a true random number based on physical principles. So what your wallet is doing there is producing a random number. It's basically throwing dice in hardware, electronic dice. And it's picking a number at random in the range of 0 to 10 with 77 zeros after it. That is a humongous range of numbers. And even if you were picking billions and billions and billions of these numbers at random every second of every day, and so were the other 7 billion people on this planet, you still would not run into any significant probability of picking the same number as someone else. So we've gone through this idea of very large numbers is the fundamental concept behind the security. All right, so how does this relate to the seed? Well, the seed itself is also a number. It's represented as 12 to 24 English words, but that's just a special type of encoding. Again, it is a number between 0 and 10 to the 77, or smaller if you're using a smaller set of words, but that's not important. So how is the software able to generate a private key offline? Well, simply speaking, the network, the blockchain, doesn't need to know. You're not registering any of this information anywhere. You're simply picking a random number. And from that random number, you can generate a public key that you can publish and a corresponding address that can be used to lock funds to your private key. That means that only with the private key that you never tell anyone about can you sign transactions to spend that money. But the network doesn't need to know about the existence of the private key because all it has to know is that you can generate a signature from that. And it doesn't need to know that until someone sends you money. So the first time that the blockchain or the Bitcoin network knows about the existence of an account is when you have someone send money to it. So I can generate my private key at random offline. I can then have my hardware wallet generate a Bitcoin address. Then I can give that Bitcoin address to my friend, Charlie. And then when Charlie makes a transaction and says, I'm paying 0.01 Bitcoin to this Bitcoin address, that's the first time the blockchain becomes aware that this address even exists. And once that happens, I can then spend that because I have the private key that corresponds to that Bitcoin address. So none of that has to happen online. We're not registering with some central authority here. We're simply picking numbers at random. Now, let's talk a bit more about these hierarchical deterministic wallets and the backup mnemonic phrase seed with a question that comes from Frederick. Frederick says, how can I retrieve my private keys from my hardware wallet if the company, Ledger or Trezor, goes missing or out of business, and my hardware fails, the device itself fails. So here's the general idea. The device itself is not important. The company that makes the device itself is not important. The software you use to run against that hardware wallet on your laptop, for example, when you connect it, is not important. What's important is two things. One, the standard. The standard is called BIP39, BIP32, and that standard ensures that any wallet that is generating hierarchical deterministic wallets does so in exactly the same way. That is the standard. This standard, which works for multiple different currencies, is implemented by all of the wallets that implement that implement hierarchical deterministic mnemonic phrases, etc. So when Trezor produces a mnemonic phrase and a hierarchical deterministic wallet based on that, it's using this standard. When Ledger does it, it's using this standard. When any of the hundreds and hundreds of hardware and software wallets are generating a 12 to 24 word mnemonic phrase that is compatible with BIP39 and BIP32, they're using these standards. So this standard is well known, it's well documented. You can write an implementation of this standard using any programming language in a weekend if you know what you're doing. And many people have. There's open source software all over the place that implements this standard. So one part you need is the standard that tells you essentially the recipe of how to cook yourself a hierarchical deterministic wallet. The second piece of information you need, the important piece of information you need, is the seed itself, the 12 to 24 English words that were produced from a random number when you first initialize your wallet. That is your keys. That is the basis for all of the keys that are on the hardware wallet. All the hardware wallet does is generate the random number and produce the seed phrase, and then from there generate all of the keys and sign transactions. But there's nothing special or magical stored inside the hardware wallet other than these 12 to 24 words. So as long as you keep a backup of the 12 to 24 words, you don't need to back up the hardware wallet. You don't put the hardware wallet in a safe and keep it safe. The hardware wallet you can leave out on your desk. The whole point is that you can't extract the seed from it. But the most important thing is that you back up these 12 to 24 English words. You write them down, you etch them into steel, whatever. You make a couple of different copies and you put them somewhere safe. Now, you lose your hardware wallet, no problem. Get a new hardware wallet or a software wallet, take the 12 to 24 English words and recover all of your keys and therefore all of your funds. It even recovers all of the history of your transactions because they're recorded on the blockchain. If the company goes out of business, who cares? There's other companies that implement the same standard. You get a wallet from them, put in the 12 to 24 English words, and you're back in business. If all of the companies go out of business, okay, great. Well, there's open source software that is this recipe. You could basically run that on your laptop. In fact, there's a number of software wallets where you can enter these 12 to 24 English words and get everything back again. So what's important? The 12 to 24 English words and the recipe by which these become keys for multiple cryptocurrencies. Both of these things can be recreated on any device, on any software, regardless of company. It doesn't matter if the company goes out of business. You have zero reliance on the company. It doesn't matter if the device breaks. You have zero reliance on the device. It doesn't matter if you lose the device, as long as you have the 12 to 24 English words. All right, let's see if there are any other follow-up questions in the chat on this particular topic, because it is an important topic and we've covered it many times and it comes up again and again. So let's see if there are any follow-up questions. I'll drink my pink water while we're doing that. No? No follow-up questions? Great. So, the next question relates to how hardware wallets and software wallets work together and the fears around that. Tatiana asks, I've heard some very scary stories when people lost all of their tokens, not only Bitcoin, but stored on hardware wallets because their hardware wallets were linked to software wallets, specifically MetaMask, which received some airdrops, and the moment they interacted with those transactions, all their savings were wiped out. How to protect our software and hardware wallets from these attacks and how to identify such attempts. So the bottom line here is that you can connect your hardware wallet to any software interface, and you don't need to trust that software interface. Now, there's a pinch of salt in that statement. There is a very, very small possibility that there is a bug in the implementation of the hardware wallet that can cause some problems, but those are extremely rare, and I know of no such bugs at the moment. And I connect my hardware wallet to a variety of different software companions or software systems so that I can execute transactions. I think in many cases what you hear when people use MetaMask and other things like that is what they're doing is they're taking the 12 to 24 English words and they're entering those into the software. And when they do that, they're basically turning a cold wallet into a hot wallet and putting it on an untrusted piece of software. And that is extremely dangerous. As long as you do not touch and never type the 12 to 24 English words onto any internet-connected device, you only ever enter those words into the hardware wallet directly. It's not a problem. You can use any software interface. You can use the company software interface, like Trezor's software interface, Trezor Suite, or the web-based interface. You can use the Ledger software to access your ledger. You can use a variety of third-party software that exists out there, from Electrum Desktop to Spectre to Wasabi Wallet to MyCrypto for Ethereum, and all of these will interface with your hardware wallet. Now, what does interface means? They don't take the private keys or the seed off your hardware wallet. What they do is they send a transaction to your hardware wallet. The hardware wallet verifies that information, shows on the screen, hey, I'm about to pay 0.01 Bitcoin to this address. Is that okay? And then you confirm on screen. The only thing you trust is the device and what it has on its screen. As long as you confirm all of the amounts and destination addresses on the screen, you're safe. That's the general idea of how hardware wallets work. Now, I would not use the same seed that I use for my retirement savings to do things with airdrops and playing around with smart contracts and gambling on online sites. For good security reasons, I'm going to keep that seed offline all the time unless I'm preparing to spend some of my retirement money. Just like I don't carry the entire value of my retirement account in cash in my back pocket, I don't put the seed that has my cold storage savings on a device and then play around with smart contracts. I have a software wallet for playing around, petty cash. I have a mid-tier wallet, which is a hardware wallet with a seed, where I do things like keep my business account and a bit more money so I can do some things that I want to spend on, more like my checking account. And then I have my cold storage, which is my savings and retirement, which is not easily accessible and is not ever even on a hardware wallet. Now, what that means is that I run a lot less risk because I'm not constantly exposing that one seed. All right. Got a bit of a storm going on here, so I hope we don't lose power. That would be a bit of a problem. So let's continue. The next question is about inheritance and death and inheritance, and how to make sure that your money is inherited. And it's related to the use of multi-sig for inheritance purposes. We're actually going to talk about multi-sig in the next week, in next week's session in week 5. But let's go over it briefly. Arnaud asks, question about multi-sig, for instance, through Electra connected to hardware wallets. How many seeds can I have on a single hardware wallet? Should my funds be separated in several pots or kept in a single pot that you secure well? So you can only have one seed on a hardware wallet at a time. However, you can always wipe that wallet and restore a different seed, use it, wipe it, restore a different seed, use it, wipe it, etc. So you basically think of the hardware wallet as a container for executing transactions with a seed, and you can load a seed on it, do some transactions, wipe it, load a different seed on it, and do some transactions. So you can use the same hardware wallet with 3 or 4 different seeds if you want to, simply by wiping and recovering different seeds onto the same hardware wallet. Every time you wipe it, you get an opportunity to start again, at which point you can recover a new seed on it. So that's one thing you can do. Should your funds be separated in different pots or kept in a single pot that you secure well? As I just mentioned in my previous answer, I would use a tiered storage system or strategy. And that means that I will have a cash tier, which is a little small amount of money that I use for cash, for testing, for quick payments, right? And typically, I will put that more comfortably on a software wallet. Doesn't even have to be a hardware wallet. So for example, on my smartphone, I have a whole bunch of different software wallets from different projects, companies, and cryptocurrencies. I'm not going to create and back up a new seed every time I want to try out a new wallet. I have 30 different wallets on my smartphone. Guess what? Almost all of them use the same seed, my petty cash seed, in which I only keep maybe $100, maybe $200 at most. And that allows me to play and learn and see how the wallets work and test different cryptocurrencies in different wallets. Now, the nice thing is that I can have the same seed installed on 30 different wallets, and that means I can open up one wallet and it can see all of the transactions that happened with the keys generated from that seed. Then I open a different wallet and it sees the same transactions. In fact, I can spend from either one. You can have the same seed on multiple wallets. As I said, I also have a different tier, which is more of my checking account, where I have my business accounts and things like that. And that's for paying salaries every month and getting paid for work I do and, I don't know, buying a computer. And then I have a third tier, which is kind of long-term cold storage for savings or retirement. I don't keep all of that in a single tier because they have different risk levels based on how much money is stored and how I'm using these seeds. However, I don't have my retirement account then split over 3 different seeds just in case one of them gets compromised, because if I did that, then I'm complicating my backup strategy. So you have to have a good balance. It's difficult to back up and manage lots of different seeds, and so you don't want to have 6 or 7 different seeds that you need to back up, because then you're more likely to lose them or lose track of them or forget which one you put the money on, and all kinds of different things can happen. So I wouldn't separate my funds across different seeds unless the funds are used in a different way in terms of how much money's on, how liquid I need it to be, and what types of applications I use it. Now the next question is about multi-sig, how to choose the best ratio of multi-sig. So for example, 2 of 3, 3 of 5, 3 of 6, etc. We're going to talk about that next week. I can give you some quick rule of thumb answers for that. First of all, keeping it simple is essential to maintaining good operational security. The more complicated you make it, the more backups you have to make, the more people involved, the more difficult it becomes, and you're more likely to make a mistake. So 2 of 3, 3 of 5 are usually good enough. You do not want to have a scheme in which the N and the M are the same. So you never want to do 2 of 2, 3 of 3, 4 of 4. Because then, if you lose one key, you're done. You're screwed. You've lost all your money. So for backup purposes, you want to have a scheme where you have some extra keys, if you tend to use multi-sig for that reason. Now, when it comes to inheritance, however, I do not recommend using multi-sig for inheritance purposes. So to the question of Arnaud that says, what are the recommendations for choosing the N persons who will participate in the multi-sig scheme? For example, if we do 2 of 3, including the 2 spouses and a trusted friend, it seems pretty dangerous because the 2 spouses will probably travel together and can have an accident, which would cause the loss of the coins of their heirs in a 2 of 3 scheme. Yes, absolutely. And that's because even if you were doing a multi-sig, would they not have backup somewhere? So if you had 2 spouses and they had a 2 of 3 multi-sig scheme, you wouldn't actually just have them take hardware wallets with them and not have backups of the seed somewhere. So even if they lost their hardware wallets due to a horrible accident, you should have backups of those seeds. It's the seeds that matter, not the hardware wallets themselves. And it's unlikely they'd be carrying them on a plane together for that horrible travel accident to cause a problem. Finally, Arnaud says, how do you prepare for the risk of death of one of several people holding the keys without giving custody to third parties? I know there are several special services for these types of risks in order to manage the legacy, but do they all imply giving up custody to third parties? This is where things get complicated, and if you want to learn more, the best resource on this topic is a book called Crypto Asset Inheritance Planning, A Simple Guide for Owners by Pamela Morgan. And you can find more information on Pamela Morgan's website, empoweredlaw.com. Now, the important thing to realize here is that inheritance planning is complex because it involves legal and technical risks, and you have to make something that you can actually turn operational. The more technically complex you make it, the less likely it's going to survive, because the expert in almost every case is the person whose legacy you're trying to secure. So in your family, you're the crypto expert. How do you secure your legacy? Because if you die or something happens to you, and now your relatives who have no idea how to deal with crypto are left with trying to do key recovery or dealing with multi-sig or accounts or security, what are they going to do? They're going to reach out to some I don't know, Reddit forum or on Facebook and say, hey, I found these 12 English words. Can anyone help me? And then they're probably going to post a screenshot on Facebook with a mnemonic phrase. Things like this happen all the time. So the bottom line is this. You do not do inheritance planning through technical means. It's not about a multi-sig scheme or a smart contract or anything like that. It's about knowing how to properly back up your seeds, and they could very easily be a single sig scheme, a single seed with a single sig transaction for savings, and simply leave information for your relatives. And as you'll read if you ever pick up the book by Pamela Morgan, the most important information you can leave for your relatives is who to talk to if something happens to me. Who is the trusted expert who can help you figure this out without robbing you? Leave them with some guidance on that. Leave them with the name of an expert. Not a treasure hunt manual, not a smart contract they have to solve, not a device they have to figure out, but a person they can trust to help them. And a lot of that then is operational, legal, etc. This is not about using smart contracts and technical means. Generally speaking, because we are in the technology field, every problem we see, we try to find a solution involving technology. Inheritance is not an area where we do that. And the reason is because almost everything we're doing in legacy, inheritance, death, incapacity planning involves very long time horizons, during which the technology changes, information becomes obsolete, we forget things, etc. It's almost impossible to design something that will stand the test of time, and I would not do that with my money. I would not be the guinea pig of some legacy planning smart contract, custodial service, or complex multi-sig scheme for my own legacy. I'd keep it really, really simple to make sure that it actually works. All right, now we have a bunch of questions about mnemonic seeds and anonymity and picking keys. So let me quickly check in the chat, see how things are going, and we'll get to the next set of questions. Mnemonic seeds. Martin asks, so is it not easy to get into someone else's wallet by simply changing the order of the words or changing one of the words for another of the words? So I have a mnemonic phrase, I have 12 words. If I just change the first one from about to domino, doesn't that run a chance of me coincidentally landing in somebody else's wallet? Now, it's very difficult for us to really conceive how English words can effectively be numbers and how big these numbers are and what the probabilities are for these numbers. So let me help explain that in a bit more detail. So changing one of the words for one of the other words. Let's look at the structure of these mnemonic phrases and the words and talk in terms of mathematics. Let's say you wanted to try and find all possible words that could fit, let's say, in the first word of a 24-word phrase. Okay, so there's 2,048 words. So you can have 2,048 different possibilities for the first word. Okay, now let's say you had a 2-word mnemonic phrase. Well, pick 1 out of 2,048 words for the first one, and then pick 1 out of 2,048 words for the second one. Now, it could be the same word, so it could be above, above. You can have repeating words. In that case, when you have that kind of combination, the total number of possible 2-word mnemonic phrases is 2,048 choices for the first one times 2,048 choices for the second one. So if you think about it, if you were running through the combinations, you'd go above, above, above bakery, above Charlie, above democracy, above, etc. And then you'd go bakery above bakery, 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 Charlie, bakery, democracy, and then you'd go Charlie above, Charlie, bakery, Charlie, 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 democracy. Now you see, I'm only using like 4 different words alphabetically, but in fact it's 2048. And if you think about it a bit more carefully, you'll realize that with 2048 chances for the first word and 2048 chances for the second word, the end result is that the number of combinations for 2 words is 2048 times 2048, or 2048 squared. Now, what is that? 4 million. All right, so that's 4 million possibilities for a 2-word mnemonic phrase. What if we add another word? Well, now there's another 2048 possibilities for each choice of the third word, times all of the possibilities that you already had. So you had 8 million possible phrases, and you can take any one of those possible 2-word phrases and add one of the words for the third word choice. So that means you have 8 million times 2048, or 2048 to the third power. So 2048 times 2048 times 2048. Well, that's 8 billion. So you went from 4 million to 8 billion by adding a third word. And you would go to 16 trillion by adding a fourth word, and then you'd go to 32 quadrillion by adding a fourth word, and then you'd go to 64 quintillion by adding a fifth word. You see how fast these numbers are getting bigger and bigger and bigger? So only 5 words in, we're at 64 quintillion possible combinations for the seed. So what are the chances that when you change one of those words, you somehow magically land on a combination that's been chosen by someone else? If you keep doing this math, you can figure out that the number of combinations is the number of combinations for each position, in this case word, which is 2048, to the power of the number of words you have, or positions you have, in your pattern. And that's how we calculate the probability of finding something, right? So the chances of you finding the same private key as someone else are 1 in 2048 to the power of however many words you have in your mnemonic phrase. So if you had a 24-word mnemonic phrase, that would be 2048 to the power of 24, or 2048 times 2048 times 2048, 24 times in a row. And that number happens to be the same as the number of possible private keys, which is 10 to the 77. It's 10 with 77 zeros. That's a very, very big number. So the mnemonic phrase, even though it looks simpler, because it's just words and you're just picking them from a small dictionary, it's just 2048 words. Once you realize that when you stack them together, they get very complex very quickly, it turns out that mathematically, a 24-word mnemonic phrase is the same as a 256-bit key, or a 77-digit decimal number. Whether you're using decimal, binary, or 2048 dictionary English word as your encoding, these are all just numbers, and they're numbers of the same size, and that size is vast. So if you were saying, what are the chances I flip a coin 256 times in a row, which is the binary equivalent, or what are the chances I pick 24 English words and end up with the same 24 English words as someone else out of a dictionary of just 2048 words, it is the exact same number, the exact same probability. And that probability is so tiny, you would never do it. In fact, you would never do it if you were trying billions of combinations a second, and 7 other billion people on the planet were trying 1 billion combinations per second, and you had 1 billion days to do it. You would still not pick the same private key or mnemonic phrase as somebody else. I hope that explains what we're talking about here. So you never have the opportunity to randomly pick somebody else's mnemonic phrase or private key, or initialize your hardware wallet from randomness to happen to find the same phrase or key. And you will never run out of probabilities or chances. You can generate seeds all day, and they will all be unique. That specific seed has never been generated by another device ever before. That particular number has never been picked by another human before. I hope that helps explain how the security of huge numbers Yes, and so let's go back to some of the follow-up comments in the chat. Tom says, does this mean that the entropy increases exponentially? Yes, it does. With every word, with every word you add to your mnemonic phrase, the entropy increases exponentially. The amount of entropy encoded in that phrase increases exponentially because what's increasing is the exponent. And that's what exponentially means. Until he says, why does my PC calculator give me to the power of 79 instead of to the power of 77? By the way, what's the difference? The difference is 100 times bigger. So 77 instead of 79. At that scale of numbers, it doesn't really matter if you make it 100 times easier or 100 times harder. Instead of taking the entire universe's atoms of silica and as the basis for picking a random number, you're only taking 1% of the entire universe's atoms of silica. Again, it doesn't really matter. These numbers are so vast that if you add or remove a couple of zeros, you go from a vast, unfathomable number to a vast, unfathomable number that's shorter by 2 zeros, but still vast and unfathomable. And that's how the security works. J. Andre asks, is there a risk that hardware wallet microchip can suffer a non-direct attack? So for example, an electromagnetic pulse or some other electromagnetic energy? Absolutely. Sure. Probably not a nefarious super spy aiming an electromagnetic pulse weapon at your particular hardware wallet. Listen, today I'm having a storm here. There is a much, much better chance that at the precise moment that I'm trying to make a transaction, lightning strikes the nearby electricity distribution panel somewhere in a building or nearby electricity system, and I get a surge in the electrical power in my house, which then causes a surge in my laptop's power supply, which then causes a surge through the USB, which fries my hardware wallet. Or I have it in a metal container, and that metal container gets zapped by lightning, or whatever. It doesn't matter. So yes, of course, hardware can fail. It can fail for much more mundane reasons. You're much more likely to accidentally destroy your hardware wallet, physically damage it in some way. It's much more likely to have a defect in the silicon that causes it to blow up than a directed electromagnetic pulse by a super spy. But nevertheless, the bottom line is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because the hardware wallet is a disposable device that simply provides a secure environment, a secure computer with very limited access ports that enables you to sign transactions in a way that can't easily be hacked or is almost impossible to hack remotely. That's the whole point of a hardware wallet. It's not a magical storage box for keys. The keys are not safe because they're in this impenetrable hardware. They're safe because they're kept offline most of the time in a device that is very, very simple and only has one purpose, which is signing transactions. So what happens if your hardware wallet gets hit by an electromagnetic pulse or you step on it or your dog eats it, and then it comes out the other end a bit worse for wear. All of those things could happen. Even more common things are floods and fires that happen all the time, and other types of accidents. What you do is you get yourself a new hardware wallet, and then you take your very securely stored mnemonic phrase and you recover all of your funds, because it's the mnemonic phrase that you focused your operational security on, not the hardware wallet. Now, how do you store a mnemonic phrase so that it is not easily stolen or subject to a natural disaster? That's a great conversation, slightly outside the scope of this particular lesson, but this is the part that most people struggle with. Some very good solutions to that include etching onto steel using various types of devices, from the very complicated to the most simple. You can literally get a stamping kit from your local hardware store and hammer the letters, the first 4 letters of every word in your seed. You only need the first 4 letters to uniquely identify the word from the dictionary. A neat little trick that was built into the design of the dictionary. You just hammer the first 4 letters of your 24 words, producing 96 letters, onto steel plate, and you put that steel plate somewhere safe. Safe deposit box, in a safe in your house, or somewhere else like that. That is near indestructible. It will survive enormous temperatures. It will survive water, electricity, and all kinds of other natural disasters. So from the very cheap to, you can go for more sophisticated solutions. There are plenty of companies that will give you steel backup mechanisms that make it a bit more convenient than spending an afternoon hammering away like a maniac in your garage while your spouse wonders what the hell you're doing this time with your crazy crypto project. I'm backing up our future and our retirement. Don't worry, it's all going to be great. So there are some nicer solutions. One I particularly like is from a company called CryptoSteel. They make a variety of backup devices, and my favorite is the capsule. It's basically a series of disks that come stamped with different letters. You get a whole box full of these. They're almost like the old printing press tiles that they would use to arrange in a printing press the letters for the front page of a newspaper. They're little metallic tiles with a hole in the middle, and then you thread them onto a steel rod about this big and screw the end on, and it's a capsule. It becomes a capsule made completely of steel. But I'm not endorsing this particular company. There's a whole variety of ways you can do this. So again, the thing you're backing up is not the hardware wallet, it's the mnemonic phrase. The simplest way you can do that, and the thing that most people fail to do, is simply write it down, pen and paper, and maybe put it in a fireproof safe, but store it somewhere where it won't be lost or thrown away by someone who doesn't understand what that is. That's usually enough. If you're going to store large amounts of money, then you want to go a bit further than that, and a simple steel device. Steel, not aluminum. I'm making a very specific distinction here. I'm not just saying metal, I'm saying steel, and the reason for that is because a typical house fire that you might have can reach temperatures that will melt most metals, but not steel. So you will be able to recover your seed if it's stamped in just simple stainless steel. Cheap stuff. All right, the next question comes from Joe. Joe asks, suppose I'm a merchant with a physical shop who wishes to accept Bitcoin payments. What is the best solution for me? How would I set this up, and what are the advantages and disadvantages? Joe, it depends what you're trying to do exactly. If you're only trying to use Bitcoin, or perhaps, let me be more expansive than that, Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. If you have a physical shop, the Lightning Network is going to be a big game changer in terms of speed, so you can execute transactions. So if you're just doing Bitcoin on-chain or off-chain through the Lightning Network, a great solution is an open source project called BTC Pay. BTC Pay is a server solution. You can host it on a variety of hosting places. Fairly easy to host. You can even run it as part of your own Bitcoin node, and you can run it on a very small device like a Raspberry Pi or a mini PC. You could have a BTC Pay server and Bitcoin node running on a mini PC by this time next week for a budget not exceeding $200 to $300. A terabyte hard drive, a mini PC or Raspberry Pi, which costs about $100, a terabyte hard drive, USB hard drive, which costs about $100, and then some work with the software. You install any one of these node packages that allow you to run a Bitcoin node, a Lightning node, and BTC Pay server. There's 3 or 4 of those that are very good, such as Raspberry Blitz, Umbrel, MyNode, etc. And this time next week, you'll have a fully synced Bitcoin node, you'll have the ability to start a Lightning node and connect some channels, and you'll have a BTC Pay server. Now, that BTC Pay server can be used to plug into an e-commerce shop, for example, WordPress or something like that. It can be used to create a web-based shop that you can put on a tablet, like an iPad, for any kind of retail industry. You want to sell ice cream, you want to sell things in a shop, where you can select specific products with photos and create like a mini point of sale system for cryptocurrency. Or you can do it very simply, where it just gives you a calculator-like screen on an iPad, and you tap in the amount you want to charge, hit enter, and it presents a QR code for Bitcoin or Lightning payments for your customers to pay right there on the screen. So BTC Pay server is a great solution. It's open source, it's free, and you can do it. It's what I use to sell t-shirts and mugs and things like that on my own shop. Now, that would be for Bitcoin. If you also want to do other cryptocurrencies, let's say, for example, Ether and DAI and I don't know, something else, then it gets a bit more complicated. You could use, again, a non-custodial service like Coinbase Commerce, which is a particular aspect of Coinbase, which is a merchant solution, non-custodial. They don't have the keys. You have the keys. In both the case of BTC Pay or some other non-custodial merchant solution, you would have either a hardware wallet or a software wallet on which you would generate your own mnemonic phrase. You would then use that to receive payments from your customers. The nice thing about BTC Pay server or these other non-custodial services is that the keys are never on the e-commerce system. All that's on the e-commerce system is Bitcoin addresses or Lightning endpoints so that people can pay you. The keys remain in your hardware wallet. And that's really important because you could have your hardware wallet in a safe with its mnemonic phrase backed up, or in your office, and in your shop, people could be using an iPad or some other easy device, or on your website to sell various products. Neither your staff, nor your customers, nor your web server, nor your hosting provider would have the keys. The keys are nowhere near any of those services, which gives you a great level of security. So that's one of the advantages of hierarchical deterministic wallets. All right, and I think we have just a bit more time talk about one more question, which I think comes from our previous session, which is a good question to end on today. And it is about transaction outputs and change. Zaira asks, can you please walk us through why exact amounts are not sent and instead change and change addresses need to be generated. Now, Sarah is talking specifically about Bitcoin or other blockchains that use what is known as a UTXO-based account system. So Bitcoin does its ledger using transaction outputs. This is very different from Ethereum. Ethereum doesn't have change addresses or change. You spend the exact amount of Ether that you want, and that's the only amount that is deducted from your account. Ethereum is an account-based system. Many other EVM systems that followed Ethereum use accounts. Bitcoin doesn't. Bitcoin uses a coin system. And a coin system, unlike an account system, is more like a bunch of coins that you have in a purse. So if I go to the shop and they say, this is going to cost you $1.50, and I open or let's say €1.50, and I open my wallet and I have a €5, I have a €2, I have a €1, and I have some smaller coins. Well, I don't have exactly $1.50. So I have two choices. I can either put together lots of little coins until I reach the amount, or reach and exceed the amount and get some change, or I can break a bigger coin and get some change. And that's how it's going to work. So within my wallet, the amounts that I have are indivisible. I can't take a €1 coin, cut it in half and give half, or take a €5 note, tear it in half, and that's €2.50 for 1/2 of the euro note. Well, I mean, I could. They'd think I'm crazy if I did that. So with a coin-based system like you have in Bitcoin or in physical cash, the units are indivisible. You can't divide a euro coin, you can't divide a €5 note. You have to spend it in whole, and when you have to spend it in whole, then you have to generate change somehow. So what Bitcoin does is, in a transaction, you have two sides, inputs and outputs. And every transaction simply does is it takes inputs, spends them, and then produces outputs. Now, the outputs can be any size you want. The inputs are whatever inputs you have that are spendable by your keys. So let's say I give you 5 millibits, and I pay you in a transaction 5 millibits. That transaction is going to create a 5 millibit output that's spendable by your address, and that's almost like a 5 millibit coin that now is spendable. In fact, it's exactly like that. It's known as an unspent transaction output, or UTXO, and that is the unit that is recorded on the ledger. It's the output of my transaction that gave you 5 millibitcoins. Now, if you wanted to pay someone 2 millibitcoins, well, you only have 5. You have an indivisible 5 millibit output. Your transaction would have to spend that 5 millibit indivisible output. It could spend that and produce outputs that pay someone 2 millibits, but where does the other 3 millibits go? Well, you'd have to produce another output that goes to a change address of your own so that you can get change back. So your transaction effectively would be consume the 5 millibit output, and you have to consume all or none of it, so all of it, and then spend it as a 2 millibit output to pay for what you want, and a 3 millibit output to pay yourself back in change. Now you have a 3 millibit output in your wallet, and you can spend that in its entirety or not at all, but you can't divide it again. So this is how a wallet works. It looks at, on the blockchain, what outputs you have of different sizes, and it tries to either join some together as the inputs of the transaction, or take a bigger one and then break it into two different outputs. Ironically, my video has now died, but the audio works fine. This is probably a good point because we were finished with that question, and that way we can just wrap up. You can't see me anymore. It's a black screen, but I'm still here. So thank you so much for attending. This has been week 4 of the Massive Open Online course for the University of Nicosia's Master's Degree in Digital Currencies. I'll see you next week. Next week, I'm going to be recording from a remote location, a hotel room. I am doing some expert witness testimony explaining Bitcoin to a jury, and that's disrupting my schedule a bit for the next few weeks, which means that you'll see me in a variety of different surroundings with far worse lights, far worse microphone, but we'll still be able to do it. But I will have more battery in my video camera, so that should work. Thank you so much for attending, and see you all next week. Bye.